discipline. It wasn't science, it was
Scientism.
scientism. Good. Let's continue on this week. John Henry Newman says, I believe in design because I believe in God. I don't believe in God because I see design. Okay? Another way of saying that was by another Englishman a few years after John Henry Newman. I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. Okay, C.S. Lewis, yeah. Shoddy kind of author, you know. Mediocre. So our starting point this evening is not the atheist argument, it is the faith-based argument. Okay? We're starting tonight with belief in God. And what can we do? What can we say when we say, I believe in God? Okay? How do we see the world when faith is the interpretive lens through which we engage with that world? Okay? Well, the two classical branches of modern Western philosophy, and I would say going back even as far as Aristotle and people like Plato, is that it was divided into two branches: metaphysics and epistemology. Metaphysics asks the question, what is real? Okay? And then epistemology reflects on the question, how do we know what is real? So typically, Western philosophy has gravitated around these two questions. What is real, and how do we know what is real? Now, last week I introduced you to this fellow, Thomas Aquinas. Now, Thomas Aquinas is enjoying a bit of a resurgence these days after being basically declared obsolete and irrelevant 200 years ago. People have taken great interest in Thomas Aquinas in recent years. Now, he belonged to the Dominican order, and that's the order of friars preachers. And it was a preaching order. The Dominicans pioneered public theology. They would go into the public squares, and they would begin to preach and teach, and they would begin to debate with their adversaries. They converted vast numbers of people in Europe at the time by going into the public squares and by opening the public squares up to philosophical and theological conversation and debate. In England, they were known as the Black Friars. Does that ring a bell? Black Friars, anybody ever been to London? Right?
Yeah.
I think it's even a stop on one of the lines, isn't it? Black Friars. There were the Grey Friars, the Franciscans, the White Friars, the Carmelites. The Black Friars were the Dominicans. Okay? Thomas was a brilliant man, but he was ridiculed as being a dumb ox. At the height of his career, he had a scriptorium in a room with 14 scribes all taking dictation. And he would go around the room and he would talk to you, and then he'd, oh, just a minute. And then he'd go and he'd talk to you. Write this down. He was thinking faster than he could write. And he would walk around the room, and this is how he wrote. He walked around the scriptorium, and he would just go from thought to thought, would think out loud, and people would write it down. Okay? He is known today as the universal doctor of the church. He was so prolific in his thought. And one of the things that made him very unique, and continues to make him unique, is he rediscovered Aristotle. Okay? He rediscovered Aristotle and began to look and read through Western history, a way that people hadn't read Western history at that point in time. He went back to Aristotle and began to realize, this fellow's saying some things that make me reflect on the nature of my own relationship with God. So he began to teach. The Protestant Reformation detested his natural theology and condemned him as the Antichrist. In fact, Karl Barth, a reputable Protestant theologian of the 20th century, once said, all frivolous reasons being aside, analogia entis, or natural theology, is the only good reason, he said, I can give why I wouldn't be Roman Catholic. Honest to God, that's what he said, absolutely. And he condemned it as being the work of the Antichrist. Now, Thomas philosophically defended the analogia entis. What I mean by that is natural theology, and we're going to begin to unpack that today. Thomas then entered into silence after having a mystical vision. Apparently one night he went to evening prayer, and he came out of evening prayer white as a ghost. He went to his room, and they said, Thomas, what's wrong? He said, everything that I have written is straw, and then he died. Natural theology and analogia entis. Now remember, I'm not assuming ignorance. If you have a question, you need me to stop. You're adults, you're going to jump in. I'm just giving this to you. Okay? We're all agreed with that? It's not about me appearing smart. It's about helping us as a community learn. By natural theology, I mean the attempt to reason philosophically to certain conclusions concerning the existence of God, it's hard to say, the existence of God, while not relying on the premises that might be thought of as deriving from Christian revelation. Okay, is that clear? Where do you need to do?
Where does free will come into this?
Now, we're not quite there yet. Not quite there yet. So, by natural theology, he means, okay, that we can arrive at certain conclusions about the existence of God independent of Scripture.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's where he got in trouble with some of the Protestant Reformation a few years down the road. Okay? But actually, when you go back and you begin to think about Thomas Aquinas, you think, well, what's the problem? It sounds like common sense, but it wasn't really common sense at the time, right? He was pioneering something sort of radical and continues to be radical. We can arrive at knowledge, and particularly knowledge of God, through our interaction and our questioning and our interest in the natural world, things that surround us. Actually, if you look at the Psalms, you see that David must have been an early natural theologian, because the Psalms are just filled with this type of imagery.
And the Socratic method, how does reading Plato and the natural theology fit into the Socratic method?
Yeah, well, I mean, he isn't, Thomas Aquinas is bringing the Socratic method into the 13th century, because his particular way of argumentation was this. Okay, he would say, question 1, does God exist? Objection, response. So his way of doing theology was question, objection, response. Okay, so he was doing something dialectical, which if you look at his Summa Theologiae, it's very hard and dense reading, because you think that Thomas Aquinas is schizophrenic if you read it, when in fact what he's doing is he's revealing this internal dialogue, this internal conversation that he's having, and that he's listening to objections and then responding to these objections affirmatively. If you can get your hands on the Summa Theologiae, do so and you'll see how he goes about doing it.
Probably online.
It's online, it really is. I mean, the PDF would just blow your computer away, but it is. Okay, so is that clear? Okay.
I kind of think that's a lot what a lot of Christians do who maybe haven't memorized the Bible as much. I think that's how they look at their world. That way, more so than Scripture.
Yeah.
Unless they're diehard into memorizing. But I think a lot of us, it's kind of how we analyze our faith.
And those that are brought up in the church from a very young age are predisposed to look at the natural world in a way that confirms the existence of God.
Yeah.
And we are, and because we're beginning with faith, right? If we begin with faith, then the horizon of questions that you are able to ask is vast and limitless. We're going to continue to get to this. Okay, but as much as we want to affirm natural theology, one of the things that we don't want to do is that we don't want to claim that we can go from the natural world to absolutely understanding the essence of God, right? That would be foolhardy. if I thought that I could go from my interaction with the natural world and then understand God as God is. Okay? And one of the philosophical puzzles is a question: what's it like to be a bat? What's it like to be a bat? I don't know. I have no idea. Why? I'm not a bat, right? I'm not a bat. So I don't know what it's like to be a bat. We don't really know what it's like to be God, but we can talk affirmatively and positively about some things that we can learn through natural science, okay? So we can look at the world, we can look at the natural realm, and arrive at common sense conclusions about the relationship between the existence of God and the existence of creation. This is a form of Christian realism, okay? Natural theology can help us understand certain aspects of God, but it cannot lead us to immediate knowledge of God. It must be understood that the doctrine of dissimilarity applies. The more we know, the greater the unknowing. Okay? Fourth Lateran Council, 1215 AD. Okay? So we already see, we look back and, oh my goodness, our ancestors were on top of this. In fact, you know what's interesting about the Lateran Council? Thomas Aquinas was invited to attend the Lateran Council to break his silence. And he got on horseback to attend the council, and he died en route. He never arrived. Some people say he was the silent father of the Lateran Council. Okay, so natural theology helps us to reflect deeply on the nature of reality. What I mean by that is the fact of existence. There are things that are. Are you going to argue with me about that point? Are there things that are? So there is a fact of existence. Things exist. We even said last week, even the unseen laws upon which science is based in some way exist, don't they? Even if we can't see them, they exist. Some of these laws require a material reality to co-respond to the theory, 1 + 1 = 2, but that is actually true both potentially, possibly, and actually. Right? So the fact of existence, there are things that are, as Christians, because of our faith and our belief in God, maybe impels us to ask further questions, like, how are there things that are? Right? Things exist, seen and unseen. How is that possible? The Greek word, and we're going to return to that, is hypostasis. We don't live in a material universe alone, okay? We don't live in a world where things just exist. We live in a cosmos. Existing is an act. Right? It's not that things are. They are something. They are existing. So a rock, for example, is much more than a piece of static matter. It's a complex system. Molecules, chemical reactions that are in a dynamic state of being. There's no static, useless things in the world. Okay? So keep that in mind. There are no static things when we look in a few moments at a man named William Paley. I'm just going to ask you to hold the question off for a minute, and then I'm going to get through the subsection, and then if you're still curious about it, stop me then. Okay? So, is there anything that I have to explain for the sake of continuing? People are content so far? You all knew this? You're saying, stop boring us? We had already thought about that, mister. Natural theology challenges the one-dimensional interpretation of reality. And by one-dimensional, I mean, fact of existence only, material only. And how does it do this? Well, the word is potency, okay? So potency is, for example, I was cleaning up Lego the other day off the floor of my office and getting fairly annoyed with picking up Lego off the office floor. And I began to realize this is a good example of potency. isn't it? All of these Legos spread out across the floor. They have the potential of being something. Okay? Actuality. So potency can lead us to this fact of actuality. The Lego, all these blocks, has the potential of being a house. You know, my son's imagination, in his will, he's not here when I answer the question, my son's imagination and will act upon these blocks in order to produce a house, a car, a castle, a dragon, right?
And then for me, from a Christian point of view, it's like structure. That's the way I get it, structure.
Yeah.
Buildings of Christianity.
You were here when I was putting the slides up, and you're skipping ahead.
No, nothing did.
Yeah, come on, look at here, we're at structure, slide 21, what are you doing?
Well, it's just what the Holy Spirit just tell me. That's the answer. You better get onto the floor. Well, thank you for that.
No, thank you, man. If it wasn't for humor, I mean, it'd be too heavy, right? So, do we understand the analogy I'm trying to draw here, okay? Things have potential, and then the two become something actually. But if the blocks just stayed on the floor, if there was no creativity, if there was no will, if there was no desire animating those blocks, they're not going to jump up suddenly and become the house. So the fact of existence, we can say there are things that are, also prompts us to ask a further question. How is it possible that there is movement and change, motion in the world? Things exist, and existence is an active and a dynamic event. Okay? I look at the world, and it's almost as though I can discern some sort of logic, some sort of animating or organizing principle at work. Otherwise, the Lego would still be on the floor of my office, right? So the fact of existence prompts us or impels us to reflect on the act. How is it possible? Now see, people often say to me, everything can be answered by the Big Bang. I remember, I was just joshing with the guy, but it completely destroyed him. We can account for everything by the Big Bang theory, okay? So there was nothing, and then boom, there was everything, okay? Bang, and then everything was. And I said, interesting. I said, so the Big Bang, right? So everything was a solid mass, and then it just went boom, and it became everything. And I said, well, what did it boom or explode into? He's like, space. I said, well, since space must have existed then, right? In order for... In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Him. Without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life. And the life was the light of the world. The light shines in darkness. The darkness has not overcome it. John 1:1, from Midnight Mass, Christmas Eve. So, any questions up to this point? I'm going to take a little sip of water. Questions, comments, clarification. I want to make sure I've got you. Right? I want to make sure you understand this. You're just afraid to ask?
I'm waiting for the ending.
And then you're going to ask your question?
No, I'm hoping it will be clarified at that point.
All right, if it's not, we still have 2 more weeks, right?
Okay.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying
Yep.
when you say it. It's the going out into the world and knowing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. And as we continue...
That's not what I wanted you to say.
It is, well, I'm thinking, as we continue along, I'm hoping that I can start to give you some new language, some new ideas, and some new concepts to take out into the world. So I understand, and it is hard. But you know, even if you save your own soul, you know, the life you save might be your own. It might be for your edification, and the words might be for you, right?
Can I make a comment about that as well?
No, no.
That's the wrong answer.
Over to.
I think, I kind of think of your question and I think about first aid courses, right? And like you don't do the first aid course once and then like you're set for life. You have to renew the course every year, right? And because it takes, like you have to continue to have opportunity to practice and to live and then come back and practice again and live and come back and practice again. And I kind of see our faith like that, and I think that's why it's so important that we have these sorts of breakout groups in the church, like Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights, and we're going to have a Sunday morning thing in Lent, because, you know, it does take a lot of sort of back and forth, hearing, reflecting, coming back, hearing, reflecting, articulating, having some more conversations out there, coming back, hearing something else, asking, you know, like I think that it's kind of like first aid courses.
Yeah, looking at it from a different angle too.
Yeah.
Really helps to clarify. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's funny is, I mean, like, for a lot of years I didn't go to church. I actually was baptized at 42. So for a lot of years, but I always believed. And it's funny because the more you're talking about this, that kind of covers my concept of God. I never stopped believing in God, but I mean, I guess I wasn't technically a Christian because, you know, I hadn't been baptized all those years and I had an issue with organized religion. It really confused me, you know. And I returned to the church because of I desired fellowship, like I needed people, you know. But yeah, that I mean, and they may not have been so articulate, but I mean, it pretty much was how I conceived God, was what we're talking about. This, yeah, well, but it's kind of, it seems really loose, you know, it doesn't seem as compacted or as organized as what you kind of get when you go to church and that kind of stuff, maybe.
Absolutely. And you know, and part of it too is the fact that we gather as a community, right? Like if the fact that we are here tonight is a subversive act. Okay? We're going to get to a fellow down the road who, in a few slides, who said education is an act of subversion. He said it's a dangerous act. So just being here in a world where, goodness, somebody brought it up this week here in this congregation, where our own Governor General is questioning the legitimacy of philosophy and theology in public discourse. I mean, the fact that the Governor General of Canada is saying we don't need philosophy and theology in public discourse. It doesn't have to be in the public realm. We are doing something that rails and stands in the face of that. Okay? So even if you leave here tonight and you don't remember these arguments, the fact that you were here and participated in this community is important in our world.
And again, I would just say look for opportunities to discuss further in other contexts. And if you find yourself like with, you know, pebbles in your mouth and you can't kind of get the concepts out or you can't articulate what you thought you heard, then come back and listen some more and try again. And like it takes time.
That
It takes
would
a
be me.
long time.
The thing that astounds me about this entire subject is the number of people that I've come across in my life that have never once stopped to think about the
Yeah.
question of whether or not God exists.
Absolutely.
The people that have never once stopped to think about where did we come from?
Yeah.
How did we get here?
Yeah.
And that astounds me.
Absolutely.
But I think that is getting to what our Governor General has said, because for those people, philosophy and deep thinking about this subject isn't necessary. They can live perfectly well without it.
Well, and we're taught that it's just about having fun. Like we're just here for
Yeah.
a good time, right?
We
Like
like to
so.
pretend that.
Yeah, we're very much encouraged to just kind of coast on the surface of life and you know, get the new iPhone and see whatever's on TV and kind of just be amused all the time. So it's easy to get by without ever.
Sometimes even in churches, because I went to church all my life, and I'd come home and say, Daddy, you know, I spent the whole evening with these people, it's supposed to be a church group. They had a little prayer, they were all embarrassed about it, and nobody said anything about God. Is there anybody in that church that might like to talk to me as a young person
Yeah.
about God? And it was no.
I don't think God wants blind followers either. I never believed that. I think that our Creator wants us to question, wants us to learn. And you can't learn without questioning.
That's right. Well, you know, as we continue, something that you said, Doreen, reminded me of a quote that I heard a few years ago. It was by Cardinal George. And Cardinal George said something, and it caught my attention. And he said, I will die in my bed. Okay, and Cardinal George passed away a few years ago, and he died in his bed. He said, my predecessor will die in jail, and his predecessor will die a martyr in the public square. As in, if the rate at which we're going continues,
You mean
it will,
successor or predecessor?
or his successor, yeah, excuse me, his successor, yeah, sorry.
It's easy to predict.
So he will die in his bed. The person who follows him will die in jail, and the person who follows him will die a martyr in the public square. So let's continue along here. What does it mean to say that God is creator? Oddly enough, Thomas Aquinas says God did not have to create a darn thing in order to be God. Creation is not essential to God being God. Even if there was no created thing, God would still be God. So what does it mean when we say that God is the creator? Remember I said, hold on to this guy's name, William Paley, in the Static Universe? Okay? William Paley is an easy target. He was a sort of pseudo-philosopher theologian in the 19th century, and he came up with a proof for the existence of God that he thought was pretty good, and has caused us heartache ever since he penned it. He said, if I'm out for a walk on the beach and I come across a watch buried in the sand, I conclude that the watch must have had a watchmaker. Okay? Let's stop and think about this. What is the problem with Paley's proof? What?
We know what happens when you assume.
Yeah.
There have been many watchmakers, not just one.
Lots of watchmakers. Okay, lots of watches. Yeah, we found one on the beach. Maybe that's not the only one out there. Okay. What else? You know, what's wrong with it? I mean, it sounds logical, right? I find a watch on the beach, I assume it has a watchmaker. Proof for the existence of God. There's a creation, there must be a creator. Does it sound solid? Sounds right? Some people are uneasy with it? Well, who's good with the argument? This is the show hands. Who's good with the argument? Yep, suffices. So, 1, 2, 3.
For me personally, Reverend Dan, God is the creator and give mankind the gift to make the watch without the mankind. And giving the gift, there wouldn't be. I mean, that's my way of looking at it. It's all a gift of God. He's the creator, and he put someone there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, he's saying the watch is the universe, right? Like if I come across a created thing, I assume that it has a creator. Okay? But there's a problem, and Paley's argument has been used by scientism and by atheism to attack Christianity because it's a weak argument. And do you know why it's a weak argument? The limitations of his historical ignorance. Paley existed in a time before evolutionary theory. He assumed that the world was static. The way it is the way it's always been. His proof is a product of his environment. I come across this watch, I assume that somebody made the watch. since evolution, I see a watch, I gotta ask myself about the processes that went into the watch. Okay, so he lives in a world where he thought everything just, the trees, boom, they appeared, the rocks, boom, they appeared, the seas, boom, they appeared, they're there. They were always there, okay? So he is arguing at a time before he had knowledge of evolution. But the other problem with Paley's argument is, if people try to use it against you, infinite regress. Do you know what infinite regress is? Okay, it's not that the world wouldn't have got started if God hadn't knocked down the first domino at some point in the distant past. It's that it wouldn't exist here and now. It wouldn't undergo change or exhibit final causes here and now, unless here and now and at every moment, God was sustaining it in being, change, and goal, directedness. You see the problem with Paley's argument? I go on a beach and I think, okay, I find this watch. Who made the watch? I assume that the watch had a watchmaker. So who made the watchmaker? And who made the watchmaker's maker? And then who made the maker, who made the watchmaker's, until we continue to go down, 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 down. This is infinite
I
regress.
just want to know who owned the watch.
So you can on that.
He stole the watch, the son of a gun.
It's in the sand, it won't work anyway.
It's in the sand, it won't work anyways.
When did he live? What were his years? When did he live?
He died, just a minute, I wrote it down. He died in 1805.
And when
Well, then he lived in an age when, after William Smith had founded the science of
Yeah.
archaeology, and evolution was becoming well known at that time.
The world that he was in, the world that, so let me try to frame this. The world that Paley is in is a world that hadn't quite understood, the world was a static world. There wasn't this well thought out, okay, well things began with a single organism, a single cell that developed, and then this, veered off here and stuff like that. So when Paley is talking about walking on the beach and coming across a watch, he means like the whole thing was there in this form that was working and ticking and et cetera, that presupposed a maker who was in a complete form. Does that kind of help clarify?
Like he might have been living at a time when people were starting to challenge that version of reality, but maybe,
The masses were.
yeah, maybe he was still kind of living. It takes a while for paradigms to shift.
There are still people today that don't understand
Yeah.
that whole concept.
Yeah, there probably wasn't a widespread acceptance at the time that he was writing.
That's right. Okay, so the people understand what is being said here with the idea of infinite regress, but also more importantly is what Fesser, we met Fesser last week. It's not that we want to know who knocked the domino down at the beginning of creation that caused all the other dominoes to get set into motion. Professor says the more amazing question is, how here and now do things continue to undergo change? How here and now do things continue to exist? How here and now, at every moment, is there being and change and goal-directedness? So he's expanding that question, right? How here and now does all of this manifesting beautiful world and beautiful universe continue to unfold itself? Well, for the Christian, this comes down to something called teleology, goal-directedness. It comes from two words in Greek, telos, which means end or goal or purpose, and logos, reason, explanation, or logic. So things that are have both purpose and a logic governing their being, their existence. Remember the quote from John 1, "In the beginning was the Word"? Well, in the Greek, it goes something like this. En arche arches ein hoi logos. In the beginning was the Logos. So John says, in the beginning was the Logos, the reason, the logic, the mind. And all things came through being to being through that Logos. So, goal-directedness. Okay? Atheism denies teleology or cosmological goal-directedness. There is no God because, you remember our friend here, Dawkins? Okay, Dawkins says there is no God because in a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces, and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky. You won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. Oh, yeah. Oh, goodness. There's the world, eh? No design, no pitiless indifference. Poor Coyote. He always gets himself into these problems. He just can't get himself out. Okay. So, I want to stop because I know it's heavy. How are people feeling at the moment? What can I clarify? What can I help you understand?
Pretty clear.
All right. So do we understand teleology and why teleology is important?
Yeah.
Goal-directedness. Okay, you know, we go back to, remember the image of the Legos? Okay? The Legos will remain on the floor of my office, scattered, disjointed, unintelligible, until what happens?
Your son comes in and starts building a
Creation
house.
or whatever, creativity or.
What does he do? What does he bring to that? He brings
Order,
thought,
creativity.
order, mind, a plan, right? I mean, at the end, the car might look a little bit crazy, but you know what? He's taken the bricks. He's taken that kind of static matter, and he's brought his intelligence. He's brought his imagination. He's brought his plan to that. And he kind of animates it and brings it to life. Okay? Teleology. That's what teleology is. He then goes about the task of creating the house, the car, the castle.
Architectural.
Yeah, it's very architectural. It's very architectural.
It's not only important when you think about the beginning of the universe, it's important when you think about your life today and the way the world is changing today. There's always purpose.
Your life today, right? Hey, your life today.
For me personally, Reverend Dan, Christianity is architectural, because that is building towards Christianity. That's the way I look at it.
Absolutely. But not everybody thinks that, right? Unless we look at the people who were, very, very set against this, right? Teleology, this architectural plan, this logic. Oh, no. Right? Poor Wile E. Coyote, he's caught in that poor pitiless indifference. No plan, nothing. It's just random. The guy's always at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, the one thought that always kept me believing in God was that I just could not believe that this was all by accident. I just couldn't believe that. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense, Steve. So why is teleology a threat to atheism? Why is teleology, goal-directedness, everything that we're talking about here, logos, logic, why is that a threat to atheism? Why would they even care?
Because you can't prove the thought process. Like you can't prove that there's a point to it. You know what I mean? And it denies what is concrete. It's not black and white. It denies what is unseen.
I always have trouble hearing you, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So, yeah.
It denies what's being, what is unseen. Like if an atheist believes that you can prove everything is right in front of you, and theology is about reason and goal from a higher being. So they can't, they hate it because they don't believe in a higher being. They think everything is random. You know, and we think everything has purpose.
Okay? You think everything has purpose.
For me personally, then, atheism is that for them, some of them sometimes will say, what do you know is real or reality? Coming back to that part again, that do you know if it was written by the disciples of God? Because anyone can pick up a piece of paper and come 10,000 years and say, this is it and this is of God. And then for some percentage, atheism comes from that. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no goal directed to anyone.
No, yeah.
And
But why does it bother them? Like, why does it bother them? Why do you have? Go ahead.
Because it's not indifferent.
There you go, yeah.
Whoa, that's
Good one, yeah.
you're going straight to heaven with that. What do you know what? You were lying.
We got the nail and that's a good
You
thing.
were lying in wait. You knew all along that you were just ready to pounce on me. Brilliant. But say that again.
It's not indifferent because what you said, the definition of teleology was purpose, reason,
Mhm.
which would annoy the heck out of somebody who,
A nice one.
Yeah.
What can you do in a world of indifference? What can you do?
Anything you want.
Anything you want.
Ooh, and direct.
Anything
With no consequence.
you want.
And no purpose.
but I don't think you'd do anything because there's no drive or reason.
Oh, no.
And no purpose.
You know,
purpose.
There's
we're
no
talking-
purpose.
We're talking about human beings. You know, this is what kills me, right? You get these arguments where they say, well, no atheism has ever committed an atrocity.
That's not true.
Who says that?
Yeah,
I've heard that, yeah.
yeah, you've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, indifference means that if you're indifferent, who's going to control the world, right? Who controls the world? If nothing has goal directedness, nothing has any meaning, your life doesn't have any meaning, this is verging on a, what?
Chaos.
Chaos. Power goes to the strongest
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
The person who controls the technology controls the world.
Person with
It doesn't
money.
matter. If you're indifferent, it doesn't matter.
And Reverend Dan,
Yeah.
for me, not because of my skin color, if you look at the process going in the same direction, there comes racism, part of that, indifference of skin color, language, hair, anything, design, everything.
Yeah.
Or just grabbing whatever you can, because
Grabbing,
it doesn't matter.
Very
Yeah.
selfish.
Right. Okay. Moving along. You know, I said there's a Greek word called hypostasis that is related to teleology and goal directedness. And hypostasis comes from more words in Greek. Hypo, which means under, and stasis means standing. It also refers to sediment, okay, like the sediment in a river. That which stands under, that which shapes and supports the flow of direction, structure. You brought up structure. And I said, hold on, you went up to slide 21. Structure. Hypostasis, teleology, goal directedness, hypostasis. All, for us as people of faith, helps us to meditate and reflect on the things that stand under, that shape and support the flow and the direction of life and the universe and the cosmos. Okay, you think about the river. The river runs where the river bed sends it. It's smooth here. It's rough there. It turns here. It's straight there. It's shallow here. It's deep there. And all of that is controlled, and all of that is affected by what? What is under the water? The riverbed affects and influences the flow of water. Martha, do you recognize that?
Is that the end of the world? Or is that Nazareth?
It's Nazareth. We visited this fantastic place in Portugal called Nazareth. okay? Those are 30-meter high waves at Nazaré. Suddenly, you're driving through the countryside and you come across these enormous 30-foot and 30-meter high waves at times. And they're absolutely breathtaking. But there's like a 500-yard area where these waves are crashing in, and then they're nowhere else.
Yeah.
They're nowhere else. Because there's a fault line. There's a chasm underneath those waves, and it runs far and deep into the ocean. And it takes a little bit of the energy, but it channels that energy, and it rushes the energy along. It harnesses the energy of the sea, and it brings it all out in this one little area where suddenly you have these magnificent waves. Something that we had never ever seen before. Hypostasis. It's an example of hypostasis, goal-directedness, energy being harnessed, producing an end result. And it's magnificent. And I had never seen it before. Okay, so is this okay? Are we okay? So, hypostasis is not just something that is, about water in rivers flowing. It's about life itself. Alistair McGrath, who we met last week, an Anglican theologian and physicist, says hypostasis is writ large through the whole universe, and in evolution, and in chemistry, mathematics, science. He says the emergence of life cannot be studied in isolation from the environment that creates the conditions and provides the resources making this possible. If the fundamental properties of the universe were such that life could not come about, then life would never have emerged. In other words, the fundamental conditions of the universe are such that life is able to emerge. Okay? Remember the potency in the act? If it's not possible for there to be life, there just would not be life. But there's life, so it must be possible for there to be life. And there he is. Very nice. This is the randomness of traditional neo-Darwinism is being supplanted. Okay, so this is happening right now. He says neo-Darwinism is being challenged right now by a more scientific, law-regulated emergence of life. The basic principles of thermodynamics and chemical assembly thus give evolution a strong directionality. Wow. Teleology, a strong directionality. Hence, evolution is not to be seen as a purely random process, since it appears to have been channeled along a predictable progression from single-celled organisms to plants and animals by chemical constraints. Is that clear? Do you know what he's saying?
It's like he's saying that's proof that there was a plan.
Well, there's something going on more than randomness,
Yeah, exactly.
right? There's something going on, because again, back to the slide, he said, if it wasn't possible for there to be life, then there wouldn't have been life. If it wasn't possible for there to be heat, there would not be heat. If it wasn't possible for there to be light, there wouldn't be light, right? So, something's going on more than pure
Well, then,
randomness.
I think that the point is just really driven home by that progression from single-celled organisms to plants and animals. Like, we're not just talking about life, we're talking about very complex life that seems to, like that image of the riverbed seems to be guided in a certain direction toward complexity, toward variety, toward development and purpose and goal-oriented. There seems to be a purpose, goal-oriented.
But you could take that argument right back to the Big Bang that you were talking about earlier. We now know with a great deal of certainty that what happened immediately after the Big Bang, the expansion of the universe, if the expansion of the universe was just a little bit faster than it actually was, or a little bit slower than it actually was, there would have been no coalescing of material that would have allowed the creation of stars, and from the creation of stars to the creation of galaxies. And if there was nothing like that that was possible, then we wouldn't be here. It would all be impossible.
That's right.
So the goal-oriented argument that you're talking about goes right back to the very narrow parameters that govern the expansion of the Big Bang, the universe, right after that creation.
Well, and the potential had to have been there,
It-
right from the
Absolutely.
start,
Yeah.
as you're saying, in exactly how the Big Bang unfolded. That it unfolded in such a way that it was, there potential for life was there.
Right from the very
Right from the
beginning.
beginning.
And we now know that the variation only had to be within 2%.
Yeah,
If it had been 2% faster, more rapid, then there would have been no coalescing of material.
That's right.
If it had been slower, the Big Bang would have regressed right back to a singularity again by virtue of the forces pulling it back together. So it's a very, very close run thing that, to me, had to have been directed by a goal.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, then for me, I get all that was saying, but for me to get to the whole vast of everything is that it's impossible for me, for mankind, for all these things to happen right at the beginning, because it did happen, because of the Creator, because it's possible by Him and not by anything else. And for me, that's the whole word that stands out. It's possible to Him.
That's
And
right.
that's why, and that brings all this diversity to where it is now.
Yeah.
That we all are here.
So you see how
That's the way
far,
I look at it.
Yeah.
you see how far we've already come from Paley.
Oh, we're so
Right.
smart at St. George.
Yeah, but no,
I have to put that
you're
in.
so smart at St. George's. Well, I'm gonna tell them.
We all are, we all are.
Don't tell the people at the cathedral that. Yeah, well, you see how far we've come from Paley's argument, just in this room, right?
Yes,
From that
indeed.
idea of a static watch, that just, oh yeah, it's there, it always was, it had, to where we are right now, which is goal-directedness, teleology, all of, like 2%, this is very, very dynamic. Which brings me to something that I wrote here for tonight. The mystery for me isn't that the universe displays characteristics of randomness and unintelligibility. The mystery is that the universe, including evolutionary theory, displays all of the characteristics of fine-tuning and intelligibility. If you focus on one aspect of cosmology, perhaps you could imagine the randomness of one thing occurring. Okay, I can agree it'd be rather random if one thing occurred. Okay, I might agree with you. But the sheer probability of the trillions, I mean trillions of interrelated phenomena that have to occur, as you said, in exacting precision to produce one molecule, let alone a single cell, is nauseating. Hey, you know what? As a person of faith, my belief in God allows me to see, within the order of sheer mystery, a logos, a logic, the hypostasis that I recognize as that being God. The other day we were at the cathedral, the choir started singing, and I opened up the hymn book, and this is the verse that popped out of the communion hymn. Lord, I bow before you lowly, filled with joy, most deep and holy, as with trembling awe and wonder all your mighty works I ponder. How by mystery surrounded, depth no one has ever sounded. None may dare to pierce unbidden secrets that in you are hidden. Isn't that beautiful, beautiful poetry? What time do we have? I don't want to
About 7 minutes.
overwhelm all of you. I'm gonna flip through all of this stuff here and flip to this one. Is that okay? I don't want to overwhelm you. Let's go back to Martin Heidegger. Remember he said, why are there things that are rather than nothing? Well, we ask ourselves, as people of faith, who believe in teleology and goal-directedness, why does a thing exist? Well, look at its function. Look at its reason for being. No thing exists in isolation. Everything exists in relation to other things. We don't live in a static universe. We live in a dynamic cosmos. The universe itself is a living thing, right? Everything is somehow connected to another. We're beginning to understand depths of things that we've never understood before. Things are more interrelated now than they ever were. Okay?
Our concept of our environment is changing.
Concept of our
And the effects of the climate change is changing. We're starting to realize that everything is affecting everything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You can't just pull one species out and expect everything else to thrive. It usually throws everything off, and it's because everything's connected.
Truly, because everything is connected. So, what is the being that allows all other beings to be? Everything in the past, everything that's coming in the future, everything in the here and now. How are all of these manifestations of existence linked into a whole? What is sustaining life in all its possibilities, compelling it to change, to be in motion, to work for its goal-directedness? These are the questions that faith impels us to ask. Why is it important for us to be here? Because we live in a world that's saying, don't ask those questions. Don't ask those questions. Well, guess what? We're asking the questions. We're being subversive. Right? Aquinas is not impressed with Richard Dawkins, who says faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think. No. And evaluate evidence. Faith is the belief in spite of, perhaps, because of the lack of evidence. Isn't that interesting? Huh? Yeah. Aquinas is not impressed with Dawkins. This guy here, Freeman Dyson. Okay, we're going to end tonight with Freeman Dyson. Yeah, he looks like Spock. The more I examine the universe and study the details of its architecture, the more evidence I find that the universe, in some sense, must have known that we were coming.
That's interesting.
Somebody knew we were coming.
That's interesting.
And he's the one who said education is a subversive activity.
Yeah.
Okay, next week we are going to lighten things up. We've got the science done. Next week I'm going to present arguments in favor of God, or proofs for the existence of God, based on beauty. Okay? Now that we have science out of the way.
Beauty?
Yeah.
Beauty.
Okay.
One of my favorite theologians said, beauty beckons. And that's a theological issue.
Beauty is also in the eye of the beholder. You asked a question at the beginning of this evening, what is it like to be a bat? And nobody had any answers for what it was like to be a bat. Well, I can tell you one thing that it would be like to be a bat. You find all the bats attractive.
Although he's upside down. He's upside down.
Get him out of this.
I'll talk about it next week.
Dan, can I just
Yep.
make a couple of comments? I am not going to be here for the next 2 Tuesdays. I have the meet and greets for the upcoming election next Tuesday, and then I need to be at a meeting for the water project in 2 weeks' time. So I just want to make one little comment to just challenge a little bit of the direction some of our comments went tonight, which is I just want to say that there are a lot of atheists who are very ethical and who are very respectful, and I wouldn't want us to, have on YouTube anything that sounds as if we're kind of painting everybody with the same brush in the way that we feel that we've been painted by Dawkins.
Yeah.
So certainly there are a lot of elements of the atheist argument that we can feel offended by or upset by, but we are talking about people, and they're as diverse as any group of people. So
People have the right to believe what they want to believe, even if you disagree with it.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that we're kind of railing against a particular form of atheism that is aggressive and not respectful. And there are, and you made that comment last week, which was that the atheism of a few generations ago actually doesn't see themselves represented by Dawkins, right? Like,
But I think you also mentioned last week that who the primarily arguments are the fundamentalist. Like, and so they're reacting to that, and so do I. After last week, I was thinking about the Greek and how they would describe people as living out of logos and mythos.
Yeah, that's right.
So out of the logical mind and the mythical, the fanciful. And so the fundamentalists, they take mythos to be logos,
Yeah,
as
right.
factual, what is meant, to be the story and whatnot. So, so as you're saying about, we're not, atheists, many and probably most are very ethical. They are ethical people.
Yeah.
It's sort of the offshoots, like the
Extremes.
and we certainly know that there are lots of Christians who
Yeah,
haven't
same deal.
behaved in very ethical
Yeah,
ways.
that's true, yeah.
Right? So-
And for me, from a Christian point of view, is that no matter what, if you look at the whole concept, we are all creation and children of God. No matter if we're atheists or not atheists or Christian, I don't know what religion is, we are children of God. And God loves us all no matter what. And that is my Christian way of looking at it, into the world. If you're homeless, if you're not, if you're there or whatever, we are all creation. We come back to that of God. And no matter what, we are all children of God, and God loves us all no matter what.
Yeah, that's
Atheist
really
or not,
important.
or whatever, He loves us.
Yeah.
That's the way my attitude from the Christian point of view. And amen to that.
Amen to that.
Amen.
So are there any outstanding questions or issues? Okay, so
I
next
love this
week,
one, so it's really interesting.
next week we're going to look at the evidential power of beauty.
Ooh, that's a big one.
This is all being big, right?
Ooh.
Once again, I feel like maybe we need to move
Well, I
away
can
from catching it
say
in
beauty
Dixie
comes not from the
cups.
outside, but from the inside.
We need to catch it in a mug. Okay, we'll see you next week without Martha here.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you.
Yes.